Good morning. In this lesson, our two new vocabulary phrases are domain and range. We're also going to add a particular definition to the word function. We've played around with functions a little bit. We're going to talk specifically about how do I know if a relation that I see on a graph actually is a function or if it's not. And then I also be able to scan a graph to identify the domain and range. First of all, the definition of a function. A function is a special set of ordered pairs in which no two ordered pairs have the same first component. So the idea here is if I know what x is, what the input is, that will lead to exactly one y value. Most of the relations we look at are functions in any particular x. Say, for example, if I knew that x was 2, the y value would be predictable. I'd know exactly what it was. In order to make it not a function, I would have another x value with a different y value. This second ordered pair would cause this relation to not be a function. Visually, the way to test if a relation is a function is by using a vertical line test. As an example, I would draw a vertical line on a graph, and as you can see, the vertical line would only touch that blue line once, so that for every x value, there's exactly one y that I would be able to find. Similar idea here. For every x value, any x value I find, I would find exactly one y value. Now, here is a non-example of a function because if I go, for example, to some arbitrary x value here, there's a y value above and a y value below. So there would be two y values, 1, 2, for the same x value. And that's what makes it not a function. Our fourth example down here, here's another example of a non-function because for this x value right here, there are two y values that would come out of it. The key for it to being function is for any input, I should say it this way, for any input, there is one output. So this is a non-example of a function. If I look here and I draw vertical lines carefully here, I can see that any vertical line I draw on this graph will only have exactly one y value. So this function, we would say, passes the vertical line test and is a function. Same idea here. This one is a function. So I've got a function here, a function here, a function here, a function here. Now that we know a little bit about whether or not something is a function, we're going to talk a little bit about domain and range. Domain, you may have seen before. Domain is the set of all possible x values. And remember that x values on our graph go left and right. So to find the domain or to identify a domain on a graph, I will scan the graph to the left and right to determine what the possible domain values are. The range is a set of all possible y values. So, and we also know that on a coordinate system, the y values are in the vertical direction. So we're going to scan the graph from the bottom to the top in order to identify what the range values are. So what it looks like to put kind of all this together. First of all, for this particular graph, we're going to first answer the question, is it a function? So we'll go ahead and just draw a couple of vertical lines here, and you can see that anywhere I draw a vertical line, that it only crosses the graph once. So for any given x value, there's exactly one y value. So this passes the vertical line test, and it is in fact a function. Then, to answer the domain and range question, for the domain, I'm going to scan the graph left and right. So I'm going to start on the left, and I'm going to scan all the way over to the right. The first place this graph shows up is -5. So the leftmost domain value is -5, and the rightmost domain value is +5. The graph ends right there. There's not an arrow at the end, so that graph ends. So the domain values go from x being -5 to x being +5. The range values then, I'll scan the graph from bottom to top. The lowest y value is -3, and that's the number that goes first. The highest y value is +3. One way to think of domain and range is if I could draw a box around the function that would contain everything. The domain is the left edge of the box to the right edge of the box. Always goes left to right. The domain is that. The range is the bottom of the box to the top of the box. So use that idea as we go through the next couple here. Here's an example of a graph that is not a function. And if I draw a vertical line on here, you can see that any vertical line will hit it twice. So this function, or this relation, is not a function. It's still a graph, it's still a relation, but it is not a function because it doesn't pass the vertical line test. That's going to be an important piece. But we can still find its domain and range. And if we think of domain and range as left to right and bottom to top, we can draw a box around the function. This box, this rectangle, would completely contain that relation. I said it's a function. It's actually not a function. The left edge of the box is at -1. The right edge of the box is at 5. So those would be my domain values. I'd put the -1 first because that's on the left. I'd put the 5 second, that's on the right, and those are x values. The range is the y values. The bottom of my box matches down here at y equals -3, and the top of my box is up here at y equals +3. So that would be the domain and the range for that relation. Last example here, and I want you to go ahead and pause and see if you can answer those 3 questions. Is it a function? What is its domain? What is its range? So go ahead and pause right now, see if you can answer those 3 questions to yourself, and then I'll give you the answer in a second. So the answer to the first question, is it a function? The answer here is yes. And the reason is because it passes the vertical line test. And then for domain and range, I'll go ahead and draw a box, the smallest box as I can around the function. The left edge of the box is at -1. The right edge of the box is at 4. So those will be in my domain values, -1, +4. And then for the range, I identify the bottom of the box and the top of the box. The bottom of the box is down here at -1. Top of the box here is at 2. So at this point, go ahead and download the 03.03 worksheet and go ahead and work through those problems. You're going to see some pictures where you're asked to determine yes or no, is it a function? And in order to answer that question, you're going to use the vertical line test. If vertical line crosses once, it's a function. If a vertical line crosses more than once, it's not a function. You're also going to be asked to find domain. And remember that domain, if we draw a box around a function, it's the leftmost value followed by the rightmost value in brackets. And you're also going to be asked to find the range. And keep in mind that the range is the bottom of the graph to the top of the graph. So use that notation to the best of your ability, and we'll go ahead and connect again on this tomorrow. Thanks.